Welcome to self-discoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Their Story Matters right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my wonderful guest today is Elizabeth Mehren. We're going to be talking about immigrants, the stories that they've left behind, the impact that they've had. The Immigrant Story is from a small nonprofit in Portland, Oregon, inspired to write, I Lived to Tell the World. And through her involvement, Elizabeth has heard powerful stories of resilience and hope from immigrants and refugees who have overcome incredible challenges. These experiences deepened her appreciation for the courage and the strength it takes to start a new life in a foreign country and motivated her to honor these narratives. Her book serves as a testament to those remarkable individuals, capturing and enduring the spirit and invaluable lessons they impart. Her mission is to spark national dialogue or immigrant and honor the lessons taught by survivors of the Holocaust, genocide, and a war about overcoming unimaginable adversity. Her work celebrates the democracy behind name take for granted, emphasizing that each survivor in her book, I Live to Tell the World, treasures every day of freedom. She carefully chooses over 50 survivors from diverse global conflicts to capture broad perspective, and each story resonates with hope, resilience, and courage, faith, humor, and even dark humor, and a profound gratitude for the opportunities they found in America. Those through these stories, these individuals, she lived. Sorry, I have to do that again. Through these individuals now live in North Pacific West. Their experiences are universal, reminding us of the enduring impact and hope of resilience. And with a glowing focus on the Holocaust and genocide education, the pressing issues surrounding immigration, racial justice, refugees. I Lived to Tell the World shines a light on the lives shaped by strength, purpose, despite their paths. And, this is something that really needs to be told because I think people forget no country. There are native Indian, which are native to Canada and to America. And there's generally natives in every land that seem to be born there. They stem from there. But every country around the world has basically being built by immigrants. And people don't understand, why do people leave their world? Why do they leave their country? Right? If it was so good there, why did they leave? Well, generally it's because it's not so good there. And they have to leave, fear of their lives, fear of their family lives, or because of such restraint that they can't have a better life there. And they come and bring their beautiful expertise and their wisdom and their knowledge and their work ethic and help rebuild this world. And I think we need a lot more appreciation for immigrants, even refugees, that have taken up the struggle to run from such atrocities that are out there. So welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you.
We were talking just before the show about, why you started this and why it was so important for you to do. And, let's just hit on that. What was it that sparked in you is that, gosh, these stories need to be told?
Well, I was in the middle of another project and kind of deeply involved in it. And then this one sort of dropped in my lap. The founder of the Immigrant Story is a man named Sankar Raman, and he's incredibly persuasive. I mean, the next thing you know, you're raising your hand saying, of course I'll work for you for free. And and he said to me, we need to write a book. I said, right, Sankar, we should write a book. No problem. It's not that easy. He said, no, we should write a book. Well, then I began to think about collecting these stories and how important they were. And the stories in the book span from the Holocaust in Europe to conflicts that are occurring right now in various parts of the world. And I realized if it's sort of almost like any family stories, if you don't gather them, they disappear.
Yes.
And they felt very urgent to me at that time. So the next thing you know, I'm writing a book. And which, as I just said, is not that easy, and it's a long project, and it requires a lot of research and so on. And just going back to what you just said, I mean, the first story in the book is about a couple who, Hungarian couple, who survived the Holocaust in Europe. Les Egner was in 4 different Nazi concentration camps, starting with Auschwitz when he was 15 years old.
Wow.
And he was so young and naive that when he saw the smokestacks, bilging white smoke, he thought that was the bakery, not the crematorium.
Mm-hmm.
And he was weighed 75 pounds when he was liberated from Dachau and spent months in an Allied hospital. His wife, his incredible wife, Eva Egner, was in the notorious Nazi, the Jewish ghetto in Budapest. Unthinkable horrors. And the story of how she and her sister escaped being shot on the banks of the Danube by the Nazi troops as the war was grinding to a halt, and the Nazis were determined to finish their awful job of,
Yes.
ridding the world of Jewish people. It's a miracle story, and that's another of the themes that runs through these stories is the belief in miracles. Anyway, they fell in love, married 60 days after they met, and were married for 64 years before
Wow.
we lost Les not too long ago, sadly. Had a remarkable life, though. And they were prepared to stay in Hungary until Hungary fell to the communists. And one day, Eva was standing in line waiting to get bread, and she heard the people behind her saying, well, as soon as we get all our communism in line, we'll get rid of the rest of the Jews. And she turned to her husband and said, we can't stay here. We can't have children in this country.
Right.
So, as she said, she credits one righteous man, which was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who allowed 100,000 Hungarians to come to the United States after the country fell to communism. And they had, typically with asylum seekers, you need a relative somewhere to sponsor you. They had a half-brother that Les had never met who lived in this strange place called Portland, Oregon. So they arrived in New York. She said that the ship nearly sank because everybody raced around to watch the Statue of Liberty as they pulled in.
Yeah.
Took the
Freedom at
train
last.
across the
Yes.
country, can you imagine? And made a brilliant life. I mean, wonderful life in Portland, Oregon. And never talked about their experiences. Went on until the Holocaust deniers showed up. And then they felt it was absolutely urgent to get their stories out there. And I agree. I mean, I think that our children, we've all read Diary of Anne Frank. We all are aware of something, but these stories need to be preserved and told. And they also need to be remembered for their consistent messages, as you said, of hope and resilience and courage.
And more than that right now, when you have entire generations who don't even know what went on in the Second World War, don't even know what the Holocaust was.
Okay.
This, Jewish bashing that we're seeing right now, not that I condone any of the Israel, Gaza, or the
Now,
Iran thing. I mean, we're looking at most certainly full-on war there, which is already taking place, and the eye for an eye only makes everyone blind, and it's like, have we not evolved yet? Are you still repeating the same thing? And I think a lot of the time we repeat the same thing is because we've suppressed or just like, oh no, we don't want to bring up the Holocaust to the children. That's too downer. If we don't bring it up, then they fantasize. Look at how many young people have become, Nazis, oh, because it's all sexy. And no, do you actually understand the atrocities, the inhumaneness of what were done to people? It wasn't just the obliteration in the showers. It was the torture and the everything else that they went through. Uh, and if we don't learn from our past, we repeat our past. And I think these stories are so important right now, not just to honor the people that took them, but as a reminder of why they had to.
exactly. Exactly. Sarah, it's interesting because it's not just World War II that's been forgotten. I taught for 10 years at Boston University, and some of my students who had been born in the 1990s knew nothing about Vietnam. And I had
Yes.
to pull out a map and go, this is
Yeah.
Vietnam.
Where's Vietnam? Oh, I like Vietnamese food. Yes, and I think that's the
Oh,
extent of
exactly.
it, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
bubble tea, yeah.
Mm,
But then, I also would find that people, if you tried to discuss Myanmar, they don't know where Myanmar is.
hmm
They can't find it on a map. I think the one of the really compelling stories, well, they're all pretty, to me, they're all important stories and they all have resonance within them. But there's a story about a Rwandan genocide survivor. And, that was numerically, that's an almost unimaginable feat of inhumanity to kill
Oh,
nearly 1 million people in 100 days
yes. Yes.
and do so in a very carefully, it was a studiously planned massacre. It was not, this did not just happen overnight. This had been planned and planned and planned. The United States did nothing to intervene. Actually, really, no one did anything to intervene.
No, it was
And
just an annihilation in the most gruesome way.
yes, in a tiny little country, 20 Rwandas would fit inside one Oregon. Although there are 14 million people in Rwanda and 4 million in Oregon, so that tells you something.
Yeah.
But it was a landlocked country with no minerals. What? So the
Mm.
United States thought, fine, let them fight it out.
Yes. I don't get any gain out of this. Yeah.
Well, what I knew was that these stories were all timeless.
Mm.
What I did not know was just how timely they would prove to be.
Yes.
And that was something
Yes.
you can't foresee it when you write. So I felt that they were timeless and that they needed to be preserved because of for the value that they served. Well, they've turned out to be hot button stories.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Come Sunday with Chadwick? I can't remember his
Yeah.
surname, who
Yes.
sadly we
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah.
Just a brief synopsis of what it is for those that haven't seen, and if it's on Netflix or whatever, I do encourage people to see it. And it's about a black pastor in a church, and it's come to Jesus, and he feels that he has to go and save everyone, that they have to come to Jesus or they will automatically go to hell. And they raise a lot of money there and a lot of hoopla there. And then one day, holding his daughter in the middle of the night, he watches what's going on in Rwanda, and he realizes that this has got nothing to do with whether they came to Jesus or not. And he started talking about, every God being everybody's, children being everybody belonging to God, and that there wasn't this hell and damnation, and they oust him out. And then he formed his own church, which included everybody, you know, um, everybody, gay, this, that, you name it. And it's like you were all God's children and you all deserve to be loved. But it was the Rwanda thing of the horrors while he was holding his own child and watching the coverage of what was going on there. I mean, as graphic as what cut women's breasts off, cut babies out of women. I mean, just the things that they did. I don't understand how any human being could do to another human being.
Well, it's interesting. I don't either. I don't
Yeah.
understand that kind of cruelty, but so the survivor, the Rwandan genocide survivor who's in our book is named Emmanuel Touraturanye. And he was 16 and from a very large extended family, his grandmother and a bunch of cousins. And his father was the pastor in their village. And Hutus and Tutsis worshiped alongside one another in his father's church. On Easter Sunday, his father preached, and they all sat next to each other 3 days later. Or maybe 4 days later, I guess, the massacres began.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Emmanuel survived. Emmanuel didn't even know the difference between Hutus and Tutsis until he was in
hmm
school. And even then, he said they all looked alike. They all spoke the same language. It was a kind of a more of an economic and class distinction than tribalism. But it was his turn to cook for the family. So he was outdoors and he scooped up his baby sister, 3-year-old sister, Amina, and ran like crazy.
hmm
And the two of them survived.
And
Everyone,
nobody else did.
everyone else was slaughtered. And
Mm.
as he said, can you imagine having to pay to be shot? Because that was what happened during the massacres. People were macheted to death, except, if you were lucky, you got shot. And
Yes.
the story then of how he kind of recovered. And the reason I'm bringing this up is he really came to a powerful level of both forgiveness and reconciliation, which is almost impossible for me to fathom.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
how can you forgive that? Well,
Exactly.
he did. And when he was married to a beautiful American missionary whom he met in Kigali, they had people who had murdered his family came to the wedding. and
Wow,
said,
that takes soul guts, heart guts. It really
and,
does.
and also some kind of an enormous sense of some broader sense of forgiveness and reconciliation than most of us could ever gather in our lives.
Exactly.
It's true. And the interesting story is that inadvertently, Emmanuel gave us the title to the book because I had been working for a couple of years with under a different title. And this is a university press book, which meant you had to go through a whole lot of hurdles to get it paid, but get it published. And finally, they said, we love the book, but we hate the title. This is like sending your 3-year-old off to school. And by the way, got to change the kid's name now, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah. So I racked my brain and racked my brain and racked my brain. And then I remembered sitting on a rock in a park in Beaverton, Oregon with Emmanuel, because these are very long and immersive interviews that led to these stories. And I asked Emmanuel why he thought that he had survived the killings that took almost everyone else in his family. And he paused and he said, I think I lived in order to tell the world.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that was a theme we heard a lot. I mean, one of our wonderful Cambodian survivors, who was a child of 5 when his father was killed by the Khmer Rouge, and his mother was sent to work out in the fields, and he became the man of the family at age 5. He said he couldn't wait to tell his story. He really wanted it out there. This is a man who's successful. He's college graduate in the United States, has had management jobs, has done wonderful things, but he wanted his story out there.
Yes.
So we heard that over and over. People ask me, well, were you re-traumatizing people? And I don't think so.
No, there's actually a form of healing.
I think
To
so.
tell their story is a form of releasing because to suppress it, it will then eat away, at the psyche and at the body and cause disease, which causes disease. So it needed to be told, not to sensationalize, but to in order to heal, but also to educate of we are so capable of being so compassionate and loving and being there for each other, but there is this dark side of us. And if we're not careful, that dark side of us can do atrocities that are even beyond our own comprehension.
Yes, and also I think because we have lived through certain experiences. For
Hmm.
example, the Vietnam War was played, live nightly in your living room in the United States. But we don't really know what that meant after the fall of Saigon for people who wanted to escape and come to the United States.
Yeah.
And what did that mean in their lives? And what happened after they got to the United States? And how did they get there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And that's I lived in South Africa for 11 years, and of course, it was in the midst of the apartheid. And one of the reasons I left was because of that. And I worked with people of color, and the next day they're gone. They've been picked up. No rights, no nothing, never come back. You have no idea whatever happened to them. And it was just such the injustice.
right.
And there was kind of no voice for it. Eventually, obviously, there was because it broke free. You've got old Nelson Mandela. I mean, bless
Yep.
him. But now what we're seeing, even though it's generations, decades later, it's going to take a few generations before the balance happens
Right.
of people cohesively living together. Because what's happened in South Africa, um, they rightly kind of took over, but they didn't have the intellect of the commerce, and they didn't support the infrastructure. And now the electricity and power is just virtually non-existent. And so whenever you do have something going on, a war, a genocide, or anything, it's going to take generations before the recovery of that, of the rebuilding of that. Never mind the trust. Never mind the economic side of it, the literal land drenched in blood. There is so much that has to heal that we think, well, okay, your war's over, you can go back now. No, what they've escaped that to go back. Some of them may have the courage to go back and rebuild, and it takes a certain strength to do that, but it takes a long time. This is what we're going to see with all these wars right now. It's going to
Right
take an
now,
awful
I
long
agree with.
time.
Yeah, the one exception though, I mean, Rwanda is a small exception because they basically institutionalized reconciliation. It is a
Mm,
crime in Rwanda to identify people by tribe now.
wonderful.
Yeah, and there are reconciliation villages. It's almost become a tourist industry. You can go visit these reconciliation villages, And there were reconciliation courts until finally, tens of more than, I mean, many thousands of people were convicted, sentenced to different kinds of punishments. And finally, essentially, the country reached some sense of resolution. And
Mm.
now Kigali is one of the safest places in Africa.
Well, it's interesting because I had a friend that went over there, fell in love with the place, and was going to open a kind of a coffee bar. She just fell in love with the place. She ended up opening a school. And
Wow.
she had so many kids that wanted to attend that school, but they didn't have enough space or equipment. And so she would come back here to Canada to raise money to take back to for more equipment to take on more schools. But she fell in love with the Rwandan people and said they are such beautiful souls, and she wanted to be a part of that recovery. So she's been doing that for the last nearly 30 years or whatever the case is. So
Well, one small little thing that came out of this story, writing this book and this project, is that some of our survivors, and I get a little possessive about them and refer to them as my survivors. But actually, we've become very good friends. I mean, I go and have coffee with Eva Egner, which is very costly to my waistline because she's a wonderful baker. But anyway,
a
and
love language, right?
she's fabulous, yeah. And other, but Saran Kut, who I mentioned, who is one of the Cambodian survivors, his daughter, just in case you're not feeling sufficiently sort of humble today, his daughter was 6 when she started her own nonprofit, building schools and libraries in Laos, which is her mother's country, and Cambodia, her father's. And now that they've befriended, so Saran and Emmanuel have become friends. So Allison is now raising money to build schools and libraries in Rwanda.
Wonderful.
I know, isn't
Yeah.
that kind of a fabulous little?
But that's the thing is like let's stop and look at this for a moment. Look at the atrocities. Look at what they had to overcome. Look at the trauma, right? What did they do? And this is something I've been doing this 12 and a half years, and I've heard some stories that are absolutely horrific. But it's about us discovering our courage, our strength, our abilities, our conviction, our calling, and stepping up there to become a solution and a light for others. When you look at these people with the trauma, they could easily have turned bitter. They could easily have turned violent. They could easily have turned negative. Instead, is that I am so grateful to have the peace and the place for which I can step up and serve others in some way. There's so much to learn from these people.
And in some ways, it's almost like the atrocities and the horrors have made them all the more determined. Yes. I
Yes.
mean, that was one of the things, actually, the lesson Eva Egner that was one of the first interviews I did. And I'm a journalist. I've been doing this my whole life.
Hmm.
I was brought into their story, carried into their lives in a way that doesn't happen in a typical interview.
Right.
And we spent hours and hours, and I went back and back and back, and I began to feel very much a part of their story. And just one more sort of, talking about technique and what happened, I let all of the subjects of these stories, reviewed the stories before they
Hmm.
were published. I wanted this to not be stories about people, but with people. I
Yes.
wanted to make sure that there was accuracy of the voice and tone. I wanted them to have agency. And in fact, no one made any changes per se. I mean, a couple of times there were, corrections and spellings and things. Also, memories play funny little games, and you sometimes
Hmm.
get things out of sequence. That's why I wanted them to review them.
Hmm.
But that was the beginning where I knew this was just something sort of bigger than I had envisioned and more than just one story on a website. And so it went on.
And so needs to be in every school.
Oh, if only
Ah,
from your lips to God's ears. But you mentioned the gratitude, and it's interesting. I don't want to feed into that sort of trope of the grateful immigrant who comes to the United States and
yeah.
says, "Oh, everything's wonderful." But in fact, one of the ongoing themes that I heard over and over was a sense of appreciation for the
Mm.
liberties that most of us in North America take for granted. Most of
Yes.
us just assume, and especially now, we're on the eve of an election. We're going through, the democratic process here. So Bahir Bhutto, who's one of the subjects in the book, he's an Iraqi psychiatrist. He comes from a very old family. In Iraq, that means like 2,000 years old, right?
Yes.
Very proud family. And he was part of the sort of very fledgling and kind of weak mental health care system in his country. He was always at odds with whatever regime was in power. he really didn't want to leave the country. He wanted to help rebuild his country until finally his name was on an enemies list, and it was
Hmm.
clear. So Bahir Bhuti ends up in Portland, where he is a mental health counselor, because of course he can't practice medicine per se, but he does it. He does it in his own way. And of course, he's kind of, I really like him. He's sort of an argumentative dude. And he gets here, soon after he gets here, he's meeting with the mayor of the city and gets into this, teleological debate. He says, you know what's great, Elizabeth? You can argue with your elected officials here and not be assassinated.
Which we take for granted, right? Yeah.
I mean, that's almost an inconceivable statement.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm a journalist. I've gone head to head with senators, with many, many, many elected officials my whole life. And when I was in my 20s, I could stand up against them and say they were full of baloney.
Try
That,
that in Russia. Try
oh,
that in Korea. Try that in China. Try
thank you
that
very
in
much.
Gaza. It's,
Yes,
yeah.
thank you very
Hmm.
much.
Hmm.
Try that in many, many, many
Yes,
countries in this world. But sometimes it's really helpful, I think, to have someone else give you that perspective, because the rest
yes,
of you take it for granted.
we do. I do actually, and I make it bit in the butt for this, but I do feel that we have become a bunch of really entitled people in North America. And, it's like we have the opportunity like nobody else does. We have access to things like anything we can desire. And I think we've become complacent. And it's more about, but I want more, and I don't like that. I want this. And it's like, where is the gratitude for what we have before us? Where are we being present? And when we look at people that have fled countries through famine, through war, through threat of life, they're coming from an ethics where if you don't participate, nobody eats.
Right.
Nobody survives. Everybody has to participate. And this is something we're losing here. It's the a kind of a sense of entitlement and opulence. And I think that we need to rein ourselves in
Right.
and hold ourselves accountable and go, every single human being on this planet has to pay rent, so to speak, to the planet, to the contribution. What is it that you are contributing that will benefit others, life around you? And
Right.
we seem to have lost that message.
We could give example after example. I mean, the fact that we have free public education in this country,
Hmm.
the fact that you can go to kindergarten and you can
Yeah,
learn, and that is not common throughout the world. I mean, Saran Kut was 9 years old when he came to this country, and because Pol Pot had banned education in schools along with money and housing and everything, private housing, land ownership, et cetera, and other things, he didn't even know the Cambodian alphabet when he was 9 years old. The first words of English he learned were the lyrics to Jingle Bells in the Thai refugee camp. And yeah, right? I mean, get this. So
yeah,
then he comes to this country, and of course, he graduates with honors from a public high school, goes to Portland State University, gets management jobs with FedEx and Intel. And what does he do? He opens a restaurant because he wants to give back to the Southeast Asian community here.
exactly. Exactly. And yet there's so much to learn, from this because, their appreciation, their work ethic, the understanding that we're all a village and everybody must contribute in that village. And instead of, well, you owe me just because I was born. I mean, there
Right.
was actually a case of a kid suing her parents because she was born. I was born against my will. I think, good God, have we gone that far? And it's like somewhere along the line, we need to rein things in. I produced a book this year called Our Forgotten Children, which is an anthology of everybody contributing, that with their teachers or autism advocates, or people that have worked with kids. And it was, 15 chapters around where the system is letting our children down and where we're putting the emphasis in the wrong areas and not the emphasis on the core being, their character, their ethics, the beautiful gift that they are. And I think when we look at people from other countries that have fled for whatever reason, I mean, look at the Irish that fled because of the famine. You know, uh, when people are fleeing, they're fleeing for a better life, a securer life, but they're prepared to work for that life,
Yes,
right?
yeah, yeah. I have very close friends here in Oregon who are apple farmers, and they are farming the land that her grandfather planted more than 100 years ago. They have had the same villages, workers from the same villages in Mexico
Mm,
come to pick their apples for the last more than 30 years. And why is that? Because people from the Northwest, residents here, will not do the work.
Right.
Very, very,
Yes.
very,
Yes.
labor
Oh, that's
intensive.
beneath me, but I don't like immigrants or people that come over and do
Exactly.
anything. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Whereas, they pay very good wages, the housing I mean, I've been to the housing. Listen, I've lived in much worse housing as a starving young person myself. Where they, I'm not saying they live in mansions, but it's all very up and up and
Right.
very nice. And that tells you something when, when we've heard this stuff, the same thing about the Haitians in Ohio now,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who have been so badly smeared. And
Oh,
allegedly, I can't say this because I have a dog lying next to me and I don't want him to get upset.
okay, cover his ears. And for people
Yeah,
if who've been actually literally their head under the pillow, a certain person announced that they were eating the cats and dogs in there, and immediately everybody went after them, which I call with the pitchforks.
yeah,
Instead of looking at what comes out of this person's mouth as 99.9% lie. And it was a lie. It was fact checked right in the moment. Yet people buy into the hysteria instead of thinking for themselves, instead
yeah.
of inquiring, instead of looking into it. Is it true? And this is how atrocities happen because nobody is looking at the core fact. The real truth of everything. They've bought into the hysteria. How do you get people to kill a million people in a few days without them building up into hysteria that these people went out and did it against, if you told them you're going to go and do this, oh no, I'll never do that. How do
Yeah,
you get them to do it? You
yeah.
get them to do it by building up this fear, this hysteria that they will go out and do. Maybe fear of their own life. Maybe they've been sold a bill of goods. But for them to go and do those type of atrocities against another human being, especially if they've been to church with them a few days prior, there has to be some brainwashing going on.
Well,
And
it's othering too. It's
yeah,
othering.
mhm,
And that's a big, big problem here in the United States right now, is this sense of othering.
yes,
Makes me want to scream. My grandparents were immigrants.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I'm an immigrant twice. I'm an immigrant here in Canada. I was an immigrant in South Africa from England. I tried to live in America, um, but that didn't work out, which probably just as well because I'm too outspoken. Probably wouldn't be saving me there now. But it's my contribution is nowhere near to the extent that they have done. But I was very grateful for, I didn't run from any war-torn things. My mother decided to leave England because she became a widow very young. And at
Um,
that time, she was 45 or 46. And at that time, you took up good works and did charitable things, and you weren't invited to parties anymore. So her life was quite essentially over.
right.
So for her, she wanted a new life, and we went to South Africa, and my mother was born, so to speak, the person that she became there, and freedom at last to be, right? So it was different reason for me coming to Canada is that South Africa is one of the most beautiful countries in the world, but the politics and the misogyny at the time, the 70s, was awful. So I had to leave because of that repression. So I think everybody leaves for a different reason. But when we understand why people leave because of war, because of fear of their life, they're bringing a different flavor to the equation. They're bringing a different thing to the equation. We talk about trauma so much in the world, but people all seem to be suffering from post-traumatic stress over something. And these immigrants most certainly can have the post-traumatic stress, most certainly from what they've been to. But they decide, don't they? They decide, I'm going to feed the possibilities. I'm going to feed the gratitude. I'm going to give back to a country that's given us salvation. And it's a different approach to things altogether. And I think not only reading what they've come from, reading the atrocities that happened in the world that have been suppressed and people don't know about, let's be inspired by
Mhm,
their approach to life and
mhm.
perhaps take that on ourselves.
And by their resilience
Yes.
and by the ability to move forward and by their
Mm.
determination and by their absence of self-pity.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
ever. Not a
Yes.
drop ever. Not from any of them.
Right.
Never poor me, never, oh my God, I broke my fingernail. Nothing to me. No, but seriously,
Yes.
but nothing, just ongoing sense of we will move forward and we will contribute.
Yes. I'm alive for a reason. I need to honor that reason and contribute. right? And I think, we could all learn a great lesson from that. The book and the covering of the stories of the atrocities that they went for needs to be a reminder for every generation, because if we don't look at it for what it is, we don't recognize the signs of when it raises its head again,
Correct.
right?
And it
Uh,
repeats itself.
It repeats,
It
yes, because
repeats itself.
we're very slow to learn.
Well, apparently so, because it
Mm,
continues, continues, and
yes,
continues.
exactly. So the more we know how to recognize the signs, the more that we educate ourselves on prevention, but also in looking at who have paved the way for us. What is our resilience, our attitude, our gratitude towards life? And when are we going to roll up our own sleeves and be a part of that solution instead of part of the problem? So the book, so it teaches so much on that level, the historical facts, the resilience facts, the gratitude facts, the contribution,
Yeah.
right?
What one thing that's interesting, it is true that all of these subjects in this book live in the Pacific Northwest.
Hmm.
But in a way, Sarah, that's kind of incidental because
Hmm.
I think I could have written this book in any state in the United States.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's another sort of sub message there, which is
Hmm.
that get to know your neighbors. Ask them,
Yes.
hello, how are you? Where did you come from?
Hmm.
Person standing in front of you in line at Costco probably has a story.
Yeah.
The person who's checking you out at the grocery store. Who are these people? What are their how are their lives overlapping with your own? Because they are.
Mm. And how many people at the present moment are absolutely living in fear that there may be, a knock at the door and people dragged out, right? And it's like, again, immigrants built North America, as many other countries. And it's, yes, there's always a criminal factor. It's human nature. There's always going to be a criminal factor.
Yes,
And it's like, do not penalize everyone else
right,
because of the few criminals. Go after the criminals.
right. And in some ways, it's almost incidental
Mm.
because they're criminals everywhere.
And any nationality, and some
That's
of
what
them are
I
even
meant.
politicians.
Oh, who could you be referring?
I do kind of, our generation that just doesn't know stuff, not taught it, it's not encouraged to speak about. Yet, here we have at our fingertips today, phone or computer, tablet, whatever, where you can look up anything, any historical thing. There is documentaries, this, that, etc., everywhere. Yet we seem to have a society that is completely dumbed down.
That does seem like it's a big case, and I don't know whether that's as simple as public education not doing its job,
Hmm.
if it's the media sanitizing things or
Mm,
things out, or whether it's people sticking their heads in the sand saying, I don't want to hear this. I don't want
yeah,
to hear this. And I think it may be some combo platter,
yeah,
this surf and turf of American culture.
yeah. But again, at some point, we have to raise our heads.
I would think. And
Yes,
if you don't learn, then it will happen again. It is happening again. It's happening at this moment.
it's happening at this moment, and you do not think because maybe you're white-blooded American. You could come from an Irish descent and someone decides to dislike you. I live here in Canada, and when COVID happened, the
Mm.
amount of Chinese people that were attacked,
Oh,
elderly people thrown to the ground and beaten up, and it was just because they're Chinese,
right.
right? And again, fear, when somebody's in fear, they are just so triggered to do things that are out of the norm,
Well,
right?
fear and feeling threatened, fear.
Hmm.
And I think we see that now because there's this whole notion that they are going to do
Yes.
your jobs. Well, sometimes they are better at your jobs than you are. Sometimes
Hmm.
they may have a PhD and you don't. Or
Yes.
sometimes they may have been working all their way up from the bottom all the way up to the top. They're and
Their
we're
work ethic may be a hell of a lot better than yours, and you're a whiner and don't want to put the work in.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
we have to, this happened in South Africa, with the Malaysian community. Suddenly, now they were allowed to go and work in the workforce, like retail stores and things like that. And then the white folk were going, well, I'm losing my job. Why? Because they have better work ethic. Yeah, they may have been paid less, but to start off with, but they had a better work ethic.
I get
And
back to my apple pickers.
exactly,
Who else will
exactly.
do it?
Right. So, I mean, please don't moan and whine that you don't have anything if you're not willing to stand up and do anything.
Good. Exactly.
Right. So
Exactly.
it's,
I agree completely. No, it's
unfortunately, you could write this book again in 2 or 3 years with, with Gaza, with, you know, I can't,
well, the chapters there is,
Lufa.
yeah, we have a Gaza chapter in the book, and we also have Sudan and Syria, and they're on
Mm,
right now, among
yes.
others. And of course Iraq, which is a different story as well. But yes, just hold your breath and it will happen again. One of the things I wanted to do in writing the book was I wanted to provide geopolitical context for all the stories, which is coming, just goes back to my, my experience as a journalist and wanting to have context and not just dumping something in. So I worked really hard on the kind of introductions to each chapter, telling what was going on and what the setting that
Mm,
where this place is, for example.
right.
Where is Myanmar and where is Rakhine province and so forth, and where is Cambodia and so forth. Because I think people think they know these things and they don't.
They've
Um,
heard about it, but they couldn't tell you anything,
yeah,
right?
and I will tell you the one that was one of the hardest ones for me to do was Sudan. And that is because it is one of the most egregious examples of the evils of Eurocolonialism. And what
Mm,
happened when the Europeans came in and said, "Oh, I don't know, we'll just take over Africa. And we'll,
yes,
and we'll just govern it from, I don't know, Belgium, or we'll just govern, which is
right,
what happened in Rwanda, or we'll just govern it from blank, fill in the blanks."
right. And we'll
And
do it in the name of God.
well, we'll do it in the name of God and our own sense of aristocracy or whatever.
Hmm.
Exactly. Exactly. And they
And
tore
then God
up.
has told us that you people need to be annihilated or you need to immediately conform to our religion.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Submit, yes. Yeah.
yes, and so they tore up, they arbitrarily imposed boundaries in places where there hadn't been or there shouldn't have been, or maybe there were, but there were boundaries for a reason and they eliminated them. They did not take into account the long history of tribal conflicts,
Hmm.
other things. So I had a long, I consulted experts on all of these chapters and talked to people and tried to, because I wanted, that's what I do research. I wanted to make sure that there was some, more than just me musing, that this had to be
Yeah.
written material.
So you're setting the stage and the information for which this story to really have an impact. So you can actually
Exactly.
feel
Yeah,
and see where it was happening instead of just going straight into the story. And
exactly.
again, there, and of course, all of this, then people can go, really, did that happen? They can look it up online and they can go further to see exactly, what happened. I mean, Vietnam War should never have happened, right? I
Well,
mean,
be a little fearful of some of what you read online because, of course, we know some of, not all of this is
yes,
accurate.
exactly. Fact check.
So I read a lot of, and there isn't a lot of material about some of it because that people, it wants to be swept under the rug in some
Yes.
cases. So I also read a lot of books and read
Mm.
and consulted with the authors and talked to experts at different universities and things. It's one of the advantages of being a journalist. You're paid to be nosy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we need that because I don't know, did you ever see the wonderful, I think it was Netflix series, The Newsroom?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Right.
I thought that was so well written, but for me, it represented the time of where the integral delivery of the news was beginning to be lost and being bought,
No.
right? We've got sponsors and they don't want you to say that, and you have to suppress this and you have to water that down because of all the corporations or politicians or whatever. And it was like, I feel the turning point of that integrity delivery of
Right.
Walker Cronkite type truth to then turning into tabloid.
Well, I'm having a really hard time now with certain newspapers, including one that I worked for more than 30 years, refusing to endorse the presidency, endorse a candidate for presidency.
Mhm.
It's tough. That's exactly what you're describing.
Yes. And we have got to a point where we just don't know what is real and what isn't anymore because there's so much garbage goes out. And I think it has to go back to please to stop, take a breath, and think.
Yeah.
Think.
Yeah.
Could this possibly be real? Who do you go to actually find out if this is a fact or not? And again, people are willing to buy the sensationalism. And that speaks to us as a humanity. Why are we so eager to think the worst of someone
Right.
rather than the best, you know?
Right. it's a gigantic conundrum.
Mm. And I kind of get, rather despaired at times when I look at us as a humanity and what we're capable of doing. Look at our technologies. Look at, all the abilities that we have. Intellectually, we can be absolutely incredible. Spiritually, we can be absolutely beautiful. Yet we still choose,
Right.
to go down this other path. And I kind of looking at it as the 3D world where it's still very much run by the fear, the greed, the opulence, the anger. The fourth is I'm walking away from that. I cannot live in that pit anymore. And the fifth, I'm more into a heightened level of consciousness where
Right.
you can't do harm to others. To do so would be to harm yourself. So I'm encouraged that we can go that way, but just not quick enough.
Not
And
enough of us.
no, not enough of it, but also I think, when we're looking at the media, we need to tell the stories of hope and compassion and love and possibilities. When what we don't, we are saturated with the next fart that comes out of someone's mouth, and expected to, rally and that and everybody is sick of it. And it's like, can we have some goodwill stories? Because if you look at that all the time, it's like, I don't blame if Earth deletes us.
Right. Well, as a journalist, I always had a formula, which was four stories for them, meaning feeding the machine, providing the stories that fill up the space, and one for me, which was always about people on the margins.
Right,
Always.
exactly.
The stories that didn't get told unless you told them.
Exactly. And the thing is, if we are the problem, but if we don't feed the solution, we are not able to move forward. And there is always a solution, but it means our participation.
Yes.
Means that we've all got to step up and be a part of it on whatever level.
Yes.
Everybody has to be a part of the orchestra. You might just be the triangulist and you're not playing it every well, but you're just as important at that particular time. And I think that's the important thing is we've forgotten our togetherness,
Yes.
right?
I actually love the guy who goes boom at the end of the
Yeah.
symphony.
Yes. Every single person, I always say, when you walk into an organization, they own the whole building, and you're going up to the top floor to see the CEO. If any of those floors or elevator is dirty, immediately your perception of the CEO has changed.
Right.
So who's the important person here? The janitor. They've just set the stage in order for you to receive. But does anybody ever look at the janitor or show gratitude towards the janitor? And I think this is the thing we again with immigrants, those that are willing to pick the apples, those that are willing to do the grunt jobs. Look at COVID and how many of them were out there because they were willing to work and pick up the slack when others go, oh, no, I don't want to be a part of that.
But in each of these stories, it's so interesting because again, I don't want to kind of foment the grateful immigrant, trope, because I think
Right.
that minimizes the contributions in some ways. But in each of these stories, people have gone on and created lives, meaningful lives that help
Yes,
others.
exactly.
Emmanuel, my friend, who's the Rwandan genocide survivor, he and I we just did a presentation at a church the other day. It was so much fun to be with him. He drives a high speed rapid transit train here in Portland. He's a Max train driver. Now, that's a really important job.
Hmm.
Gets
Hmm.
people to and from the airport, to and from one end of the city to the other. The cockpit looks like something on a fancy jet plane or something. And I just love it. I mean, I just
Hmm.
think it's terrific. The people at his employer didn't realize that he was a Holocaust survivor until someone mentioned that he was in this book.
Right. And again, they're invisible people most of the time because we take it for granted.
Right,
Right.
right,
And we don't look. I mean, people won't get their heads out of their phones and look around.
right.
There is a story sitting next to you.
Well,
There is
that's what
somebody over there that a smile will make a difference to them today,
talk to neighbors, talk to
Yes,
people, have conversation, find out about people. Most people are dying to talk about themselves,
exactly.
tell you their stories.
And everybody has a story, like, well, I don't have a Holocaust story, but you have a story of survival, something you went through, something you had to find the courage and the strength to get through. And that, now it has set you on the path to do what you're doing. It's the willingness to take the journey in life and to find that meaningful purpose out of the darkest days, right?
Yes, you know, what happened to me was really interesting because I had written the book, and as I said, we'd gotten the manuscript approved and everything else. And literally days after that, I was struck by this very, very rare and obscure medical condition, which left me paralyzed from the clavicle down.
Wow.
And yeah, and the prognosis was incomplete quadriplegia, which is not a phrase you want to hear associated with your name.
What
Um,
is that?
well, it means that you're paralyzed mostly. So it means that maybe something will come. So they did, what it meant was they really didn't know because it was just such
Right.
a rare and obscure thing. And several things happened. One was that in the court, very soon after this occurred, and I was immobile in a ICU, and my friend Emmanuel came to visit me. And he had, in order to see him, I had to have him stand at the lower left-hand corner of the bed because I couldn't move otherwise.
Mm.
So Emmanuel's, you know, a lovely man. I said, could we please say a prayer together? We did. And when he left, he turned to another of my friends and said, you know, she's going to walk again, right? Well, he was right. And
Mm-hmm.
but while I was in this period of weeks and weeks and weeks of not knowing what the future was,
Yeah.
I seized on the lessons that I had
Mm.
gathered from all of these people in this book.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, later I rewrote the afterword because I very seldom, I'm not an I journalist. These stories are not about me,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt strongly that this was a way to explain how meaningful these
Yeah.
lessons had been.
The influence that they had on you.
Yes, if they could
Yes.
get through this stuff, you know,
Yes.
if Eva Egner could get through months and months and months in the, you know, notorious Jewish ghetto of Budapest, if Sven Ung could make it through the killing fields, almost 5 years it took her to escape, etc. If they could get through these things, if my, another of my friends could make it through Bosnia 4 years in
Yes.
Sarajevo, etc., then I could do it.
Right. Became your generator, right?
Well, it became a guiding star too,
Yeah.
kind of a North Star for me.
Mm. And that's the point of a story, isn't it? It to educate, to inspire. I always say from inspiration becomes invitation. You were
Mhm.
inspired by their stories. It invited you to believe I too can come
Sorry.
through this. See if the dog agrees, right?
Did I mention my 85-pound dog?
I heard that. Yes, she did it. But that's the point. They inspired you so much that you believed, okay, this is my, you know, whatever struggle is that you're going through, whatever you wanted to label it. But if they can come through that, I can come through that.
Well, it was true. I mean, it's
Yeah.
absolutely true. And I often seize on those things. One of the things is, you know, a sense of perspective that no matter how bad you've got it, someone
Hmm.
else has it worse. And I heard
Exactly.
that over and over from people that, you know, when you're in somewhere and you're eating leaves because that's the only food you can find, well, at least you're eating leaves.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, so I mean, I heard this over and over from different, mind you, you know, we've collected more than 50 survivor stories, so that the ones that are in the book are a compendium. We worked really hard because we wanted to make sure that they were all verifiable, that they represented different geopolitical areas, different genders, different conflicts, and so forth. So it was a very carefully curated group of stories.
Will
But
there be a book two with some of the other stories?
oh, I don't know what there will be a book to. I mean, this one, this isn't just a book for me, Sarah.
Hmm.
I want
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want it out there. This is like you and your work. I
Yes.
want it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the reason why I do my work is to bring your story out there for
I
people
am very
because,
great. I'm very
for
great.
me, it's about listen, learn, and apply.
Right.
Listen, and learn what you need to learn, but how can you apply it to your life? They
Right.
can make your life better, make the lives around you better. It's not just, entertainment, it's about inspiration. That is that invitation. What
Right.
can you do in your life? And if it pivots people to just look at other people that may be immigrants and go, what's your story?
Right.
What's your story?
How
Where
did
do
you
you
get
come
there?
from? Yeah.
Exactly. Where did you come from? What was it like in your village?
Hmm.
You know, I mean, we all know these stories of the people who come here with not a dime and not speaking a word of English, and then they had having double PhDs. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, and those are real stories, and they're really important.
Yes,
But that also does not minimize people who come here and end up working in a gas station or
exactly.
somewhere else, because they're providing a service and an important piece of labor.
Exactly. And this particular genre is called Their Story Matters.
Yeah.
right? Everybody's story matters. And there's two words I don't like: compare and compete. You
Right.
leave the competition to actual games, right? A comparison, apple or orange, well, they're both lovely fruits. It's all a preference of what you feel like at the time. But do
Right.
not compare yourself to other people. Do not compete with other people, right? The whole thing about life, if this is self-discovery wisdom, it's discovery of your wisdom that lies within you, that lies around you, that you can download. How do you use that wisdom to make
Exactly.
your life better and the lives around you better? But it comes in our self-discovery, our
Right.
strength, our wisdom, our resilience, our abilities, our heart. Yeah, I get asked, who do I interview? All those that come from the heart. If they come from the heart, they're doing it for the right reason.
And our
Right?
fortitude and our ability to keep going, right?
Yes.
All of those important
Mm.
things. To say that I'm not going to let a little something stop me. I'm just going to keep going.
And it's not to undermine that something has upset you, or we again, no compare. This person came from this. No, it's not comparing your stories. But what you're going through right now may be painful.
Right.
Take the moment to grieve whatever it is you're going through, to hug yourself or to look for a hug. But I always say our emotions are there as an indication as to something happening to us and we're reacting with that emotion. Do not become emotional over the emotion,
Yeah. That's great advice. It's great advice.
because that's where we get stuck.
Yep.
And then the emotion takes over. The emotion is meant to be spent so that you can move on, not
Right.
get stuck in it. I think if, this book not only educates, which again, I think it should be in all schools, I think it should be in households where people talk about it. This is not, the family. I'm huge on books for Christmas, anytime, but, Christmas is coming up. This is a book, yeah, maybe heavy, but at the same time, hope, 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 resilience, and joy. The fact of where they are today and what they're doing. And I think if a family could read that together, and kids then look at their lives and go, my God, I'm really grateful for what I have. I'm not going to
Yeah.
take it
Really.
for granted, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Sarah, one thing about it is because they're all self-contained,
Mm,
it's not, I'm not going to say it's an easy read, but
right.
you can read it in installments. And,
Yes,
and I
exactly.
think you can feel satisfied upon reading that you've learned something,
Yeah.
that and that you have been enriched in your soul by finding out something about somebody else.
And just looking at people differently, right? Looking at people differently. It's like we paint this brush over everyone, and it's like everybody has that story. If we could just take the time to hear what that story is. It's not, there are the people that love to live in victim mode, and they love the attention that they get. You can't help those people. They have to be willing to help themselves, maybe with your help, but they've got to be willing to help themselves. But those that have gone through things and gone through it, and they're sharing that story to show how resilient we can be,
Right.
right? How awesome and gifted we can be because we do have the skills. We've just got to discover them, right? Who helped them along the journey to understand we all need help along the journey, and how can we pay it forward?
Well, pay it forward is a big thing, and how can we
Mm-hmm.
get back? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and again, I think that's just a critical message in here as well.
Paying it forward. If we do not look at our own lives and be grateful for what we have, I wake up every day. Thank you. I have a day before me, right? You've given
Yes.
me another day. I don't know what this day is going to be. I don't know
Right.
what state I'm going to be in this day, but I have a day before me. And
Yep.
so what I do with it is up to me. How I address it is up to me. And I think for so many people, and I feel really definitely in the North Americas, we've become so entitled that we don't understand, what the country has been built by. And it's been built by people that struggled, that they came to this country, our countries, Canada, America, for a reason, to start a new life, whether they were running from something or whether they were just needing a new opportunity because they couldn't do it in their own country. If they were happy there, they wouldn't leave,
Right.
right? And they've come here, and this is a new opportunity. All of our pioneers, look at what they went through to build this world for us. How many deaths were had when they got here because of the environment or anything else that they had to go through? And we need to look at who built and what their stories are and say, in gratitude, thank you. Thank you for your resilience, your tenacity, your contribution, because
And I
I'm
think
here today because of that.
who is continuing to build today. You're
Yeah.
right. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with it, with the pioneer era of the 19th century, because imagine as hard as it was to get to the United States, now get across the United States, go
Yes.
across the Rockies, go across
Yes.
the Sierra, go up the Oregon Trail. I mean, this is
Right.
quite an event. But the same thing of people who are coming today and contributing and making everything better by being here.
Hmm.
And maybe not making everything better, maybe sometimes, misusing things, but who doesn't? Right?
Yes. And that again comes back to our balance of conscience,
Right.
right? And we will always find the bad apple. The whole thing is get that
Right.
apple out of the barrel as fast as you can, right? There'll always be people who will exploit. They'll do it in their own country, they'll do it anywhere. They're exploiters and they're going to go wherever they can vulture, right? But it's for us to look at those and go, that is who they are in whatever package they come in, skin
Right.
color or anything else. But we do not paint the brush over the entire in nationality because some people were bad. And
Right.
again, we can look at politicians, and not all politicians are bad, but
But a lot of them are.
oh my
Some of
God. I mean, as a
them.
sideliner, I'm looking, and I even had a conversation with the other day. Please explain why.
Yeah, well,
What
I
is
would.
it you see that I don't see? Because it's so obvious to me. And there was so much that she actually did not know because she didn't pay attention. So I educated her on so much that was going on that she didn't know what was going on. And that comes down to, and I'm sure you as a journalist, the whole reason that you did the work you did was to inform people, right? When you're informed, you're going to make better decisions. You're going to make more educated decisions. And we need to always own that. Um, are we informed on our choices or are we knee-jerking?
Right. And you make better decisions when you have information of any kind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to look at the source that you can trust that information, right? That's important. Where are you going that you can trust that information
Yes.
rather than just buying, sensationalism that's being put out there?
Or the dreadful mis and disinformation that are out there now in such, epidemic numbers. It's scary.
Very,
Very scary.
extremely scary. And that comes down to our own intellect. Like, that doesn't feel right. I'm going to inquire that deeper, right? And it's this, what are we buying?
Right.
And so we don't have to purchase everything. We can be discerning on what we buy and what we don't buy, and be accountable. Be accountable for what we take in and what we decide is true or not, and be accountable for what we put out.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, accountability is kind of a rare trait these days.
Yes, yes. I'm always in about ownership, responsibility, and accountability for our actions. And, we may do things in ignorance at the time because we don't know better. But when we know better, we owe it to ourselves and everyone else to do things from that education of knowing better.
And maybe to repent a little bit, maybe to
Yes,
and fix our, to try to repair
yes,
whatever damage we may have caused.
exactly. We're going to make mistakes. And the biggest thing is let's own it. It was a mistake. I didn't think or I didn't know at that time. I apologize. What can I do to make things better, or I will do better?
I have a big mouth. I make mistakes.
We do because we're human. That's how we learn,
Right.
right? It's that what we want to make sure is that the cost of that mistake isn't so great that it harms someone in such a way.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
and that's our accountability. I'm so glad you've written this book. It is so important,
Thank you so much.
now, obviously, but it's so important for people to actually understand how important it is to read these stories. Never mind the inspiration and the invitation, but the fact. And interestingly enough, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed three people, authors, that decided to write um, stories that actually had a foundation of truth. One was based to the Bosnia genocide, but he
Oh,
wrote a story that was kind of set in that. Another person on the South and segregation, another one who's a
mm,
Native American. Totally different story,
wow.
and I call those, factions,
Yeah.
bringing in the fact in a fictional way, which many people kind of learn through storytelling rather than from, factual data. And but as long as that factual data is based in truth, the fictional story makes it something that is easier digestible. But you've told people stories from their story, from who they are, their experience. And as you said yourself, the resilience, the inspiration, who they are today, what they've achieved, their attitude of where they've come from and what they're doing here today is an example for us to all look up to.
Sarah, there's two Bosnian stories in this book, and one of them is just it to me, it's an incredible love story. It's
Hmm.
just that's the thing about this book. It's not filled with gore, it's not,
Right.
with blood rushing through the streets. You don't need to describe that. You
Yeah.
just but it's filled with wonderful humanity, and
Yeah.
there are love stories within it,
Yes.
and then there's kind of the stories of there's motherhood stories, there are stories of things that really resonate, I think, in our souls. And
Yeah.
I think, storytelling to me is a valid way to gather information and convey it because it's
Mm.
real.
Yes.
As long as you can validate it, which we did in these cases.
Yeah.
There were a couple of stories we didn't use because we simply could not validate some of the
Mm.
elements within them. And we just felt we couldn't do it. We couldn't put
Hmm.
them out there unless they were completely verifiable.
How many stories are in here?
13.
So let us honor the journey they've had because
Um,
they're a lesson to us, they're an inspiration to us, and they're an invitation to us to look at those that have come to our various countries to contribute, but what they came from, but also what did they bring with them.
yes, very much so. Very much so.
It's time for us to pay attention, right?
Very
Pay
much.
attention to the past so we don't repeat it. Pay attention to the people that are contributing now. Pay attention to what our actions are for our tomorrows.
And pay attention to the contributions that the newcomers to our countries
Yes,
may make as time goes on.
yes.
The mayor of Boston is the daughter of Chinese immigrants.
Hmm.
You know, let's move forward. I mean, this is
Yeah,
exciting.
please move forward. Yes, it's a number of years ago, I did an interview with someone on how many immigrants brought their religion with them, which actually were filling the church again, where so many Americans had left the church.
Right.
Right. So it's there's always benefits. So there are some countries begging people to come to them. They will actually pay people to come to them because my generation, the baby boomers, we're retiring or dying out, and there are not enough people to step up and continue things on. And as
Right.
much as AI and machinery will take over an awful lot of jobs, we still need, the intellect and the physical and the contribution of real people. So it's stop knocking it. Look at who they are, not just where they came from, but who they are and what they
Right.
went through and why they're here. Why don't you ask them? Why are you here?
What is their brain trust? I mean, for
Yeah.
example, it breaks my heart that so many well-trained people in the medical and dental industries, for example, cannot practice their trade in this country because there are just obstacles to it. I'm not
Yes.
saying every single person who's, graduates from medical school in every single country should automatically be given an office and
No,
there's
no.
plenty of people here who could be enriching the medical trade and the dental trade and other, to help with other people, but they can't.
Mm. Yeah, we looked at that in Canada because we have 3 million people plus without doctors, and we just do not have enough. So now they're looking at people who have immigrated that were medical practitioners in their own countries of how they can expedite their way in their training, and most of it is language, and being able to read all those prescriptions and a few things like that, but how they can expedite it to get them into the workforce because their credentials are there. The barrier most of the time will probably be language.
It's
Um,
great that they're doing that, yeah.
yeah, but we have to. I haven't had a doctor in 6.5 years, and it's very, very difficult. We're in dire straits here. So, this is the thing. If we don't have it at hand, then let us import it. And that means allow people to come from other countries that can contribute, right?
Right, we drive imported cars, what's the difference?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I really do think that we need to change the way we look at things. And, I'm praying this show comes out actually on your election day.
Wow,
And I am praying with all my might and energy that it goes the right way and that common sense does prevail and that we do move forward and because there's going to be an awful lot of healing that has to happen even in that process
not a
um,
what?
I think you're going to see an awful lot of eruption with a certain person's loss. Um, but it's now you need somebody who can roll up the sleeves and say, okay, now let's get on with it.
Yep.
So hopefully, I pray, and hopefully that changes the dynamics. But please, folks, as I say, books are a wonderful gift for Christmas. I think this is an incredible book to give to families and to say, did you know? These are some wonderfully inspiring stories, but look from where they came from. This isn't just an education. This is an inspiration, and this can show you how much resilient lies within you that you didn't know you had.
Yeah, obviously, Sarah, I'm a little biased, but I think it's also a multi-generational book. For
Yeah.
example, I think you as a grandma could read this to your 10-year-old, read it with your 10-year-old grandchild
Yes.
or 11-year-old grandchild,
Hmm.
maybe not younger than middle school, but maybe
Right.
middle school, and discuss it
Yes.
and find out what it was like going through the 3 year siege of Sarajevo, and how did you end up, starting a musical program for
Yeah.
disadvantaged youth in Oregon as a result, and so
Yes. Yeah. And I think, when we capture them at that age and the parents or grandparents get involved with it, opens up to such a world of discussion and
Mhm.
intrigue and a desire to know more.
Yes.
That the ripple effect of it can be incredible. And it may only come from one person's story that's inspired them in the book. But yeah, that's what we want. We want it to be a door opener.
Yep.
So
Exactly. Exactly.
gift it to your teachers in middle school, right? If you buy a few copies and donate it to the school, gift it to the grandparents or the parents, gift it to people that you feel will honor it, but also talk about it. I talk about book clubs. I think they're wonderful, people getting together and sharing what they get out of it. I talk about podcast clubs. Listen to the podcast. What did you get out of it? Share it because now you've got a rounder picture on it. But it's all about the conversation. Where can you take it from here? What did you learn about it? Who can you share it with? Who else can be inspired by? Right? So just keep it on going. So let
Exactly.
us, hmm?
Exactly. I'm agreeing with you.
So where can people get the book? Where can they find you? And I know you've got actually two websites here. So can you let people know how they can get hold
Sure.
of you and get the book?
Yes, well, the book is available on Amazon. It's available at Powell's here in Portland, which is Powell City of Books, which is the wonderful block-long bookstore that we have here in Portland. Amazon is probably the easiest way to get the book, but it's certainly available on Amazon. And if you love it, please leave a rating saying how much you loved it. I have a website, which is elizabethmehren.com, and an email, which is elizabethmerenauthor@gmail.com. And I'm happy to respond. We also have a website for the Immigrant Story, which is www.theimmigrantstory.org. And I strongly recommend that people look at that because it contains many, many stories. We work with students from around the Pacific Northwest to tell these stories. So it goes beyond, it's about portraying the lives of immigrants in daily life, normalizing the
Yeah.
conversation, which is
Yes.
so toxic.
Very, 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 and we do need to normalize it. So the spelling of her name is Elizabeth, and then it's Mehren. So
Mhm.
elizabethmehren.com, and then you've got the immigrantstory.org, and you can reach out to her at Elizabeth Mehren, author at gmail.com. And of course, you can get it on Amazon. As I said, this is a great gift to give for Christmas, to give to the schools, to give to communities, to even give to other immigrant communities. Let them read about each other. It's not just about, this nationality and that nationality. There is a camaraderie between people that have come from other countries. They know what they've given up. And they know how many people do I know spoke to someone the other day. They are both here from Vietnam. They're trying to get their landed immigrancy and they have to work like a dog and they have to go to school and they have to do that. They had to leave their children behind
Um,
because they can't bring their children. How many people have to sacrifice that in order to pave a better world for their children in the future? And so we need to honor those sacrifices. And the people that they've left behind, a life that they've left behind, a culture they've left behind. But they've brought that culture with them that we now go and immerse ourselves into and enjoy. So, let's put away your prejudice and your ignorance and your arrogance, and let's step into understanding we are all united, and let's get to know all of us in our different flavors. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Elizabeth, for writing the book, for bringing this to our attention.
And thank you for this really wonderful and provocative and interesting and, enjoyable conversation all around, enlightening. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and the impact that it will have, for many, many years to come. And it's the honoring of the story, but it's the educating, it's the resilience, the invitation. I did not know, now I know. What am I going to do about it? Right? And that's the importance.
Absolutely. That's it. So thank you again. This is just such a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. To everyone out there, understand everybody's story matters. Everybody has a story. Instead of judging the cover of a person, how about you inquire? Where did that person come from? Did they have to make any sacrifices to come here? Did they have any fears when they arrived in their new country? Learn the story, because there's so much more empathy and compassion when we know each other's story, and there's a hell of a lot less judgment. So until next time, folks, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tab at the top there, and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration, it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.